Hello, welcome to the assembly guide, or video I suppose, for the Dellichord 70S. It's available as a flat pack version, and this is how you would assemble your flat pack. You'd need some sandpaper, 150 grit dry paper, which is included in the kit actually. Divide it up into 4 and get it on the supplied sanding block and start getting rid of the furry bits. It's very important, as per what's on the screen there, to not sand off the very it's almost sharp. In fact, beware of the sharp mited edge and do not sand it down. It's important that for good neat joinery of the mited box, that edge is not touched almost at all. Just remove some of the little furry bits, give it the lightest of touch, but the rest of the joint needs a proper sand to smooth it out, so the jointing goes smoothly and is a nice tight fit. Same with the rebate. In this section of the video, it needs to be smooth and fur free, and folding the paper and getting into the corner may or may not be necessary, but make sure that the joint is ready to glue up. Clean, smooth, no furry bits. Again, we're at the miter. I rocked the block there just so I could feel that the block was flat on the face or the surface of that joint, and not sanding off the pointy mited edge. Here, in reality, you would sand the little furry bits on the inside of the holes for the rebate for the tweeter, and the mounting hole for the tweeter, and the same for the base mid and the port, before you sanded the face of the front baffle. Obviously sand with the grain, and the object of doing the sanding of the face last is so that any little sanding scratches that sandpaper may have made while you're doing the inside edges will of course be sanded off. Then you need to sand the edge of the baffle, which needs to be, like the rebated section of the outer carcass, needs to be completely fur-free and smooth. And in fact, as you may see later in the video, you may need to sand even a little bit more off just to get the right fit up. It's a very tight tolerance piece of CNCing, the 70S, which is great. It means little glue is needed to get it to go together, so you get minimum mess and maximum structural integrity, but it does need to be fit. It does need to fit just so, and of course with high humidity, which we were experiencing the day we shot this video, the tolerances are tightened up a little bit. In this shot, we are sanding off the little rebate sections that the T-nut heads fit into on the crossover / rear terminal assembly. So the locating of that board correctly in the rear baffle is taken care of by the T-nut heads, but there will be a few little furry bits there you'll need to sand off just so it fits in nicely and fits flush and there's no air leaks, and a good structural connection is made. Now here's an example where I am sanding little furry bits. You could sand a nice little, you wouldn't call it a sort of chamfer as such, but just put a little bit of a radius on that terminal hole in the back, and then sand the face of the rear baffle. You notice the numbers all join together, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4. That's so that the pieces come together in the right order and the grain matches on the outside of the enclosure. Once again here, sanding the edge of the rear panel or rear baffle, and obviously making sure it's smooth, and just a little bit of a light sand on the edges just to get rid of the furry bits, but we don't want to round over the edge. And once again, rocking the block as necessary to get a feel, like in right there, to get a feel for where the flat face of the edge is, so that we're not rounding it off or sanding it at an angle. Now we're cleaning the dust out. Now you can use probably 3 different ways to do this: a brush, blow it, or grab your air blower, which many people have. Of course, in a factory we have plenty of air. It's the way to do it, but you don't need it. You could probably use a damp cloth if you've got time to dry. That would give it get rid of more of the dust than blowing it with your mouth. but you need to wait for it to dry properly. So flipping the panels over, making sure that they're all in a line and that the rebate, bearing in mind the rear rebate is shallower than the front baffle rebate, but the giveaway will be that the grain all lines up as it does there. And of course you're getting it, you basically at this stage we're just putting the pieces together and checking that indeed we've got the orientation correct, and obviously the grain won't line up on one corner, that being the bottom, one of the bottom corners, because obviously you've got to start somewhere and finish somewhere else. So the idea here is to knock the panels together a little bit, so you get a good snug fit, and of course they need to be lined up correctly, so they'll wrap around the front and rear baffle appropriately, as you'll see shortly during the dry fit up. Take your time. You need a flat surface. Just checking there that you could use a little block of wood rather than just the tip of your finger or your eye. Block of wood makes sure, I guess, they're lined up. It is critical, but not super critical because of the rebating. And of course, ultimately, you can sand any slight misalignments. But, best to get it right in the first place. Certainly the CNC machining is done correctly, so it's quite easy to get it right. So tape it up with a little bit of tension between the panels, so that they're sort of tight against each other. They certainly don't leave any gap between them. But don't move them too close together or crush them up so that you once again damage that sharp edge that's going to give us the neat, high quality jointing that we'll get otherwise on this not fully modded box, but certainly modded box as far as the outer carcass parts. Tape's pretty good, it's pretty sticky. Maybe if it's super humid that won't stick so well, but it was very humid the day we did this and it was fine. And now flip it over carefully. If you leave it sitting on the bench and flip it over, nothing will become detached. The pencil's there to make it easier to pick it up because the bench in this case is very, very square and true, and you just can't lift the thing up unless you prop it up to start. So the tweeter clearly goes at the top, and the rear baffle is marked top. But in reality, the terminals go at the lower edge or towards the lower edge. So the idea is to, of course, make sure the tweeter's at the top and the terminals are effectively at the bottom. But the top of the rear baffle is labelled and it should go to the top, which the top section of carcass is labelled with a pencil. So just using, obviously if you've got an assistant, now's the time to employ them. But you can do it yourself with a bit of tape and a bit of practice, I guess. So we're doing a dry fit up here to make sure, we want to see what the clearance is and make sure that everything fits together and that someone, namely Dellichord, I guess, hasn't cut one panel incorrectly or something. That's unlikely to be the case, but you don't want to find out after you've got glue over everything that something's not right. At this stage, the real thing we're trying to do is to see what the clearance is going to be. The front and rear baffle should move around very, very slightly, as we're checking here, in a lateral way, side to side, up and down, not in and out, obviously, although, if it's excessively tight, you won't be able to pull it out. There was very little clearance in this case on this day, no doubt due to the very high humidity, although in future kits we have cut the rebate, I think, 0.05 of a mil or maybe 0.1 of a mil deeper, and that will be better. But the thing is, you don't want to cut it with too wide a tolerance because obviously in a super dry day, or if it's been dry for months, there will be a certain amount of shrinkage and there'll be maybe excessive clearance, but probably not. In this case, we're going to sand the panel down a bit more. Now, you won't be sanding it down much. That plywood does not sand by hand particularly quickly. Probably use a fresh sheet of 150, lean into it, and you might take off. You may take off that 0.05. Certainly, I know how this story ends, of course, and we did get the clearance we needed without too much sanding. Another trick you could use, although we probably should discuss it at the gluing stage in the video shortly, but you could water the glue down very, very slightly. I think it's recommended an absolute maximum of 15%. That seems like a lot, but 10%, it just makes the glue a little bit easier to work with. It will depend on the weather at your end. And I say that because in warm weather, this glue goes off very fast. Not excessively fast, but if it's a 38-degree day, you might want to choose another day, or definitely thin the glue a bit. So we notice we've got more clearance now. I'm still going to sand it some more, but we did end up with what we needed. I think I had 2 stabs at it and ended up spot on. Rear baffle, same thing. Check the clearance. Make sure you just got that little bit of room for the glue to squeeze in, basically. I mean, some might say, don't you want it tight? Well, you do, but the glue's got to go somewhere. Now, as you'll find out in the gluing section shortly, we use very little glue because it is quite a tight fit up. But you've got to use enough to make sure the box, of course, is sealed and well glued together. Fresh piece of paper because, sandpaper's cheap. I know we only give you 1 sheet, but you probably use all of that and more if you're going to use the same paper to sand the exterior of the enclosure for sealing and top coating. Obviously, top coating you use a much finer sandpaper. The 150 is only for pre-sealing painting. Plywood dust is awful, and realistically, certainly when I'm doing this in production, I've always got a mask on. It's quite furry, nasty stuff. I recommend you wear some kind of mask. If you're doing it outside and there's a bit of a breeze blowing, it won't be so bad. So once again, we're checking that we don't go and assemble this box with the terminals in the wrong spot or the tweeter at the bottom, just indicating that it has got top written on the inside of the top panel. And now we've got, you can see just a nice little bit of rocking there, a bit of clearance. And of course everything fits together very nicely. Handle with care when if you're moving the box around with that 1 bit of tape or even a couple of bits of tape holding it. Just be aware if it's super moist air, the tape might come off and your bits are going to go everywhere and possibly get dinted. So don't do that. So now we're definitely getting into let's glue this thing together mode. So we pull it back apart, lay it back out on the bench. We've basically checked that everything we've done is right and it's ready to go. So a quick clean out of all the jointing, make sure there's no foreign objects in there. Once again, you could brush it, you can blow it yourself with your human blower, but nothing's going to beat 75, 90 psi at the end of a air blower. So naturally we're doing that since we have it available. So get your tape ready. You need the same 3 bits of tape that you used for the other 3 joins. You need for the 4th. The glue, as we mentioned, you could water it down a bit. This day I did water it down. Look, I don't know if it was even 10%, but it was just enough to just make it be a bit more, a bit wetter, a bit more fluid, less viscous. You need a damp cloth. I'm attempting to show that that's damp. It needs to be almost not dripping, but water going everywhere, definitely, but it needs to be quite damp because as you wipe the glue off here and there, off the work surface and off the job, and off your fingers for that matter, it will dry out as you go. This will take 15 minutes to do, and the weather we have here today, that cloth was getting quite dry towards the end, so yeah, quite moist. So don't use too much glue. This is the number one thing for success, is work fast. Perhaps that's the number 2 thing. Number 1 is just don't put too much glue in. These are precision fit, these joints, and as we'll see when we lay the front baffle and rear baffle in to make sure the joint is wetted on both sides, You don't need much glue. Spread it around, but you do need to work fast. If you've got an assistant, they should be getting their finger in it as well and getting this stuff spread out as quickly as possible, because you definitely try to glue it up while the glue is still quite wet and not starting to harden. Well, not so much harden, but start to become viscous. You want it to flow out of the joint nicely. Now you don't want glue flying over that front edge, so you want to wipe that off with your damp cloth as you go. So when it goes beyond the rebate and over the edge that will show at the front, you want to wipe that off. And of course you also want to wipe it off the work surface, because you'll be moving this box around shortly and you're going to get smears of glue all over your job if you've got glue everywhere. And it's another great reason for a precision fit up and using minimal glue, because otherwise you're just going to have glue everywhere, and of course you're trying to make a finished surface out of that that exterior of that carcass, and you don't want glue stains all over it. So keep things neat and tidy, wipe up the glue, and of course cover every surface. And this is shot in real time, so this is it's kind of how long it takes if you're fairly used to doing it. So get all of the jointing in the carcass covered in glue, and leave a little in the corner of the rebates, because that's where you want to make sure that the front and rear baffle will give it a bit of squeeze out and definitely make an airtight joint. And but better that it spreads onto the inside of the box mostly than on the outside. So now we're going to, we've got the baffles orientated correctly, i.e. the top of the baffle is lined up with the top of the box. You can see top written on the inside of the rear baffle there. And so we've just had a quick look to see that panel, that edge is actually wetted from just sitting it in there, which it is. So we've got the right amount of glue in there. If you haven't got enough glue, then you'll lift the baffle out and notice that the surface of the joint's not fully wetted. And what you're about to see happen, I actually re-glued that joint, because it only just had enough. So when this happened, so you need an assistant, or you don't stuff up, basically. So that tweeter's pointing in the right direction. I don't want to go on and on about the orientation of the baffles, but they will go either way. Okay, so you will notice when you do a wet assembly that the glue holds things in place a bit anyhow. And yeah, give it a bit of pressure so it sticks, and then away you go. And we've kind of almost built a box at this point. So push the front and rear baffles towards each other, make sure they're sort of home, wipe off the excess glue at the final joint, and obviously the key thing and obviously just get the big gobs of glue that are, there won't be too much squeeze out if you've got the gluing quantity correct, but do clean up quickly as you go. But yeah, get the first bit of tape on, obviously line the baffles up, the same as the other ones when you tape them up on the bench, on the flat, and just get them to line up. Put a fair bit of tension on that and tape it. Now, interestingly, people sometimes say, hey, how does this work? You just tape it together, don't you need to clamp it? Yeah, no. Vast majority of manufacturers don't, because they're cut to such a, the CNC allows you to cut to such a degree of precision that it all just kind of works. And that's the joy of buying this properly cut out, ready to assemble kit. There's a level of accuracy you just can't achieve with a saw. So yeah, it works. The jointing is good, and the joints are, with the right amount of glue in there, they're very strong. We do, because of the slight proud nature of the window frame style box, we do clamp the front and rear baffles together, as you're about to see. Just put the rest of the tape on there, and you'll see, you may or may not see in the video just how good the jointing is, but we'll get to that in a second. So pushing those baffles towards each other. If you've got too much glue in there, it may open the carcass up. Just keep closing it. Just press the baffles together, clamp them up, and then go around and, to some degree, manually squeeze out. I mean, we're only talking about 1/10 of a mil, but it may open the carcass up a touch. But when you build your second one, you'll know not to put as much glue in. So, clamping up the front and rear very lightly. Just a bit of tension. There's nothing to be gained by leaning on it, and then put something between the clamp and either the top or the bottom of the box, so the clamp doesn't mark the enclosure. In this case, I had nothing sitting there ready to use, so grabbed a piece of sandpaper. Because those clamps, being quite heavy, will ding that plywood, and you won't sand that out. A piece of timber waste is probably a better thing than a piece of sandpaper, or a piece of rag or something. So now we're sort of wiping off, a combination here of wiping off the glue that may have leaked out of the joint. In this case, there was virtually none, because bizarrely, even though it's taped together, it makes such a precise fit that it's when it's wrapped up that no glue really comes out. Now you just see me using the handle of the hammer there, just to for want of a better woodworking description, just sort of peen the edge over there a little bit. So you're basically burring the or burnishing. I don't honestly know what the correct woodworking term is, but in the metalworking world, that would be a peening over effect. Not that you do it quite like that in metalworking, but the point is you're just curling the veneer, or not the veneer, but well, it is a veneer of the plywood against the other one, against the mating surface, and just so you end up with a slight radius. Here we are using a wet artist brush to get the excess glue, using a bit of water. There's nothing exotic in that bottle. Out of that little clearance, little shadow line area. And once again, if you've got the gluing amount right, there'll be very little glue blowing out everywhere. Back to the hammer process. Well, we'll get to that again in a second, actually, because once you get all the glue excess off, I'm now doing the rear baffle. There's very little in this case, but I mean, honestly, each glue up job is different to the next. So here we take the tape off. This box has been together for about 10 minutes now. The glue is already starting to go off. So what I'm doing is I'm just reworking the area of that edge and re-burnishing it, or whatever terminology you'd like to use, to where the tape has been, because plywood's quite tough, it's quite hard, and where the tape is, basically, it doesn't give. So, and you're also making sure that there's no excess glue under that tape, which is kind of unlikely. But so I'm not pressing particularly hard. Obviously, make sure the claw and the head of the hammer are not scraping the box, and I'm sure there's other tools you could find that are more suitable, but that's what I use because it's there and it works. So then we're retaping that. We're retaping the whole joint more or less, but it's really not that critical. But some fresh tape and longer and more of it, just to make sure that there's no chance it's going to come apart. Now, this box is going to be, frankly, it's probably never going to come apart in 15 minutes time anyhow, because that glue will have dried enough. Now, this glue takes 24 hours to fully cure, but it is done pretty quickly. I do love it when that other phone keeps ringing. So, here we are going to insert the damping pads, of which there are 5 in this particular configuration, at least, inside the box. I do love these glue guns and their associated sealants, etc. So much fun. No one's really invented a good one yet, except the one that runs on batteries, and that's what this needs. This stuff is very goopy. It's going to wear your wrist out trying to squeeze it out. Obviously, it's a fresh nozzle. Obviously, took a bit of pumping, but so you put a lot of the supplied sealant on this pad, and when I say pad, it's a piece of MDF offcut. There's not a lot of fanciness to what it does, but it works perfectly. So you're adding a little bit of mass and a constrained layer, and it needs to, when this squashes on, it needs to spread that out to a complete thin film of about 1 millimeter thickness. Now, don't get this on your fingers, don't get it on the box. However you want to put it in there, but leave a gap around the edge so you've got something to grab hold of. On the sides, which clearly I'm doing a side now, there's a 5mm gap between them or thereabouts, and it's on the midline of the mid-woofer hole. And I'm not sure that the camera really shows what's going on there, but basically it's equidistant front to rear, and the joint between the 2 panels, as I say, is on the midline of the woofer aperture, hole, opening, what have you. You don't need to be any fancier with the application than that. It will squash flat. Just squish it, squish it on, push it down, 10 or 15 minutes, and you'll be right to turn the box around and do the next one. So there is no, you see there I'm indicating the midline of the woofer hole. There is no need to put one on the bottom panel. There is only one on the inside of the top and 2 on each side. Your kit, the pads may be slightly different. There may be one longer piece because we do try to use offcuts rather than wasting fresh material for something that no one gets to see. It's mainly that the mass is the same, and that you use that black stuff, that Soodle product that we supply, which has got the right properties. And the video seems to be stuck. Maybe it's finished. Thanks for listening. That's how you put together your Dellichord box, 70S model, and the next video will show you how to screw the drivers and the crossover in.